My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I run Spainguru.es, and this is Spanish Non Lucrative Visa webinar, March 4th, 2026. It's structured in 3 parts: before the application, where we talk about eligibility documents, financial requirements; then during the application, where we go through the timing process and common mistakes; and after the approval, we talk about the arrival, the tarjeta de identidad extranjero or TIE, renewal of the visa, and potential citizenship. So ask your questions anytime. Make sure to add a question mark at the end. Remember, this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements vary by consulate and or BLS. Always verify with yours, and laws change. Information is current as of recording date, but of course, I'm not an immigration lawyer and this is not legal advice. My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone. I've been facilitating the relocation for English-speaking foreigners to Spain, and Spainguru has been since 2014. You can find great reviews out there, almost 300 5-star reviews on Trustpilot and on Google Business, more than 18,000 newsletter readers that I send every Monday, 150,000 community members across several Facebook groups and subreddits, more than 1,000 videos on Spainguru's YouTube channel, and more than 50 personally vetted trusted partners that help your move be smooth and in good hands. If you haven't joined yet, please join the Spanish Non Lucrative Visa Facebook group with 28,000 members, and it is by far the largest and most active, with more than 30 messages written every single day. Now let's start with before the application: definitions, eligibility, and background. What is the non-lucrative visa? It's a residency visa for non-EU citizens to live in Spain. If you're a European Union citizen, you have the right to reside in any of the European Union country members, so that this visa wouldn't be for you. You must prove sufficient funds over a certain financial threshold, and no working is allowed. You will get an initial 1-year visa or residency, and then after that year, you will have to renew it, and the renewal will be for a period of 2 more years, and then a second renewal of 2 more years, totaling 5 years. And after those 5 years, you will be potentially eligible for the permanent residency or long-term residency, which is much better than the non-lucrative residency, and eventually citizenship. Some passport holders can actually access to eligibility of Spanish citizenship after just 2 years. So Hispano-Americans, Filipinos, and certain other countries. But generally, it takes 10 years of legal residency in Spain to be eligible for the citizenship. So normally, the long-term residency comes first. What is the non-lucrative visa for? It is generally for retirees wanting to live in Spain. People normally call it the retiree visa. Okay, but not necessarily. Nowhere in the law says that you have to be a retiree, but just an adult person of more than 18 years old, enough. Okay, requirement, as long as you have enough passive income. That could be investments, it could be savings, it could be receiving pensions, yes. And of course, you can bring your couple as well with you, okay, and also families as dependents in the same application, okay, as long as the dependents are minor children, so less than 18 years old. And this is one of the big changes since May 2025. Adult children may no longer come as dependents in your application, okay? So this visa is not for digital nomads or remote workers, right? For that, you have the digital nomad visa. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. Now, it's important to understand that you can only apply for this initial visa from a Spanish consulate abroad. And it has to be the consulate that serves the area where you are legally living in, okay? You cannot really choose your consulate unless you have dual citizenship, right? For example, if you're a dual citizen from the USA and Colombia, potentially you could apply from the consulate in Bogota, okay, using your Colombian passport, okay? But otherwise, for example, if you live in Atlanta, Georgia, the jurisdiction of the Miami consulate takes Georgia as well. So therefore, with your driving license, you prove you're a legal resident in the jurisdiction, and then you have to apply from Miami. You cannot apply from Boston, let's say, right? Now, certain consulates use a third party to process the non-lucrative visa. In the USA, you have Washington, D.C., Miami, Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco use BLS, okay, which is an huge Indian company, for the processing of different types of visas, okay? But if you are applying at New York, Boston, or even San Juan de Puerto Rico, you do it directly with the consulate, right? So not all the consulates use BLS services for the processing of this visa. Whereas in the UK, the 3 Spanish consulates in the UK use BLS, and it's a much more streamlined process, okay? So London, Manchester, Edinburgh, all of them use BLS. Therefore, you will have to deal with BLS in that case, okay? So always check the official website of the non-lucrative visa or non-working visa of your consulate. That will have the official links and explain whether they use BLS services or not, and then we'll have a link to the BLS website in case BLS processes the non-lucrative visa. Also, if you go on Spainguru.es, I have a dedicated page for every consulate in these 2 countries, including Canada and Australia, and there the cool thing is I list every first-hand experience from people who are applying, from people who were approved or denied, and I list it in each of the dedicated pages for each of the consulates, so you can be also informed from others' experiences, which is, I think, a very important information. Something important, the Schengen zone is a 29 European countries group, okay, that is internally borderless. Okay, so the immigration borders are only in the outside of this group of countries. And if you're a non-European Union passport holder or associate country, you normally have maximum 90 days as a tourist permitted to stay within this area in a 180-day rolling period. Okay, some people need a Schengen visa to enter this area, for example, Filipino passport holders, but if you're American, USA, Canada, Australian, you don't need a tourist visa. However, all of them need to respect the 180-day rule, okay? If you overstay this rule and then you want to apply for a non-lucrative visa, be careful because you can have consequences and that can jeopardize your application, okay? Now, once you obtain the non-lucrative visa for Spain, this rule stops applying for you, but only in Spain. You still have to respect it in other Schengen countries. It is true that many people say that, how can Spain enforce it or know that I am traveling inside Schengen, etc.? That's another discussion, okay? But the truth is that the 180-day rule still applies when you go out of Spain, if you're a non-lucrative visa holder. Now, let's talk a little bit about taxes, very briefly. Very important concept is tax residency. So when do you become a Spanish tax resident in Spain? There's 3 conditions. The first one, if you stay more than 183 days in a calendar year from January 1st to December 31st, that is the tax year in Spain, yes? Doesn't matter your immigration status, either as a tourist, then as a passport, as a visa holder or residency holder, it doesn't matter. Those days don't need to be consecutive. If you're over 183 days of physical presence in a calendar year in Spain, you become a Spanish tax resident. Then there are 2 other conditions: if your main source of income is from Spain, or if your family lives in Spain, right? So it's important to understand that the tax year in Spain is a calendar year, whereas the immigration year is a natural year that starts when your residency starts. So for example, if you enter Spain on July 2nd, and then you obtain your TIE when you are able to get your appointment at the National Police Station, normally the TIE start date will be on July 2nd, the day that you enter Spain with holding a valid visa, right? So your immigration year will go from July 2nd, 2026, for example, to July 2nd, 2027. So tax year and immigration year are completely different things in that sense, okay? And when we talk about minimum stay requirements for visas and immigration, we're talking about the natural year and not the calendar tax year. So this is a concept that many people mix. And of course, there are strategies if you don't want to become a Spanish tax resident in Spain during certain periods and still live more than those 90 days in 180-day rules. There are strategies that you can have or follow, okay? So have that in mind, right? Then some people also learn about the Beckham law and they say, oh, there is an interesting special tax regime called Beckham law where I could be taxed only 24% for income up to 600,000 euros for the first 6 years. But to be clear, non-lucrative visa holders are not eligible for this special tax regime. You need to be an employee working for a company, and that's, of course, not permitted for the non-lucrative visa application, right? It is also important to understand that there are double taxation treaties between Spain and more than 90 countries, including the USA, Spain, UK, Canada, Australia, and many more, and has deep implications for the type of income that you have, where it is taxable, where you pay taxes first, and then where you pay next. But the important thing is that you should not be paying taxes twice on the same concept. So whatever you pay in one country, then you can credit it towards the payment of your taxes that you owe in the other country, if any, right? So this is especially important for Americans who still need to file taxes, regardless of whether they are tax residents, okay, all their lives, as long as they hold passports and they're over 18 years old. So it's very, very important that you plan your tax transition, okay, first from a tax perspective, then from an estate perspective, and of course you can find my recommended vetted professionals on Spainguru.es, and you can also join my free webinar that I will have the next one in 5 days, like this one. You can ask your questions, you receive the recording, it is free, and you're more than welcome to join. Now let's talk about documentation. So this is a short list, okay? It's not everything, and of course every consulate will have longer or shorter lists, okay? Because there are many interpretations of the law, because there's one law and one regulation for all the different countries, but of course the documents and certifications vary by country, so the list will be different. And of course, each consulate, you probably heard, they are very different and they apply very different interpretations or criteria for the same rules. Sometimes they even invent requirements that don't exist anywhere, only in their minds and in their consulates, unfortunately, right? So let's talk about the core documents checklist. You will need a valid passport, minimum 1 year validity recommended. Some consulates, they state it, some others don't mention it, but you will have problems if it's gonna expire. You will need passport size photos. Every consulate will have different sizes. Some consulates that work with BLS, they will take the photo, even if you bring your photo, so they will charge you for that service. So read first-hand experiences as well, and also the requirements. Completed visa application forms. You have a couple of forms there that you need to fill. Proof of financial means via bank statements, and also tax returns, depending on the consulates. Also private health insurance, okay, with certain conditions we're gonna talk later on. And unless you're a UK retiree, potentially you could use the S1 form to access the public healthcare system in Spain instead of a private health insurance. A medical certificate, which is a one-page document, not older than 3 months, issued by a doctor. Criminal background check, in the USA, FBI background check, in the UK, ACRO, not older than 3 months, okay? Some people say 6 months, some people say 3. So for this visa, for this non-lucrative visa, officially, the standard is 3 months validity, unless stated otherwise, right? Proof of accommodation or address in Spain. So depending on the consulate, they have strict interpretation of this part of the regulation, or they are loose. So for some consulates, for example, they just ask you which province you want to move to, for example, Seville or Extremadura, or Extremadura is not a province, Cáceres, for example, or some other consulates, like, for example, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Boston, they ask for a rental contract, okay? And many people suggest and have been successfully approved and comply with this extreme requirement by showing an Airbnb rental that then potentially they cancel or they reduce, okay? Because they tend to be expensive, but is enough to comply with this requirement from the consulate. Now, I have a video with Ainhoa Manero. I will show you the link later on. She says that she never shows a rental contract with her customers because this is nowhere to be found in the law, and it is risky to rent something. It is expensive to do it even before knowing that the visa is going to be granted. So she makes the case, but of course she's a lawyer and she knows what she's doing, and she does it, I understand, and everybody understands that maybe you don't want to add friction to the process. Then, if you are moving with your spouse, marriage certificate. If you're moving with children, birth certificates. And also, unmarried couples can also be included as couples if you prove that you have a legal partnership, or you prove that you are a stable couple via proving cohabitation, children together, joint accounts, etc. Okay, all these official certificates, 3 months, okay, validity, unless stated otherwise. Some people say 6 months, okay, and that can be true. And also, I hear from professionals that consulates tend to be more flexible with marriage and birth certificates, and they give 6 months validity for this one. So as you can see, it is very, very flexible. All foreign documents, okay, official documents, need to be apostilled by the countries that are part of the Hague Convention. So this is legalizing the documents so that the Spanish authorities consider them valid, right? And they need to be apostilled by the authorities who issued them. For example, if you got married in Cyprus, the apostille must come from Cyprus authorities, right? If you got married in California, California authorities. If you got married in another country, from that other country, right? And sworn translated if it's not in Spanish. If you got married in Colombia, for example, you need to get it apostilled, but you don't need to sworn translate it because it already comes in Spanish. And something important about the apostille is that in the UK, if the medical certificate is signed by a UK doctor, it also needs to be apostilled. Okay, something that Americans don't need because American doctor signature may not be apostilled, but in the UK, the doctors can be registered at the foreign ministry, FCDO registered, and their signature needs to be apostilled to be valid. Now, let's go with the financial requirements in 2026. Good news is that in 2026, the IPREM, the index that sets the bar for the financial requirements of this visa, has not changed. Okay, and this index can only be updated when the national budget is new. Okay, and it's been 3 years that the government doesn't have political agreement with other parties to update the national budget. Therefore, the IPREM is frozen. But next time there is political agreement, for sure it's gonna increase. You need to budget for those increases, because when you apply with a certain financial threshold, you do your math, but then when the renewal comes, if there is a new IPREM, then the new IPREM will count, right? As of 2026, the main applicant has to have at the very least 28,800 euros in 1 year, okay? Each dependent, 100% of the IPREM, 7,200 euros. So if you're moving as a couple, it's 28,800 euros of the main applicant plus 7,200 euros, it's 36,000 euros for the couple for the initial application in 2026, right? When you renew, if you apply it only with savings, potentially, depending on the region where you live, in the province where you live, potentially you have to prove double the amount, because you need to prove that you have enough money for the full 2-year period. The initial application is for 1 year, but the renewal is for 2 years. And if you're applying with savings without passive income, you need to prove that you have enough saving for the whole 2 years. And that's when people say, remember that potentially you will need to prove double the amount. So for a couple, it will be 72,000 euros in 2 years. Now, if you have recurrent passive income, of course, that will add up during those 2 years. Therefore, it doesn't really is not calculated the same as with savings. Okay. Now, we mentioned that in order to prove the financial requirements, consulates or BLS offices, they will ask you for bank statements. Okay. And depending where you are applying from, they will ask for 3 months, or 6 months, 12 months bank statements. Okay. The important thing and the general idea is that the funds need to be accessible, readily available, liquid, without penalties, without delays, right? And if you have income, it may not be active income. It may not be because of your direct labor or work, right? It must be passive, right? It must be passive. So if, for example, if you're renting properties and you have 1-2 properties and you rent them out on long term, that is passive income. But if you have 30 properties, you rent them on Airbnb, that is a business. This depends on the criteria of the person reviewing your case. If you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you need to appoint a property manager so that you clearly are not involved in the daily operations of that business. Sorry for that. Forgot to low down the volume of my phone. Now, what changes when you renew? Again, when you renew, you need to prove that now you have enough money for the period of 2 years, right? We mentioned that certain regions will require that amount times 2, but not all the regions. For example, Madrid is not the case. Valencia is not the case, as reported by Spainguru community members, but Alicante does. So if that is a problem, if you're really close to the threshold, make sure to move to a place where you won't be required double those amounts, okay? Now, what is the simplest proof? And that's why they call it the retirement visa. If you are receiving a pension, this is the safest source of income for Spanish authorities, right? You're receiving a pension. They know that the government will keep on paying that pension, so it's sure that you're going to get it, okay? And there are different kinds of recurrent passive income that may or may not be considered safe. For example, rental income. Rental income, some regions when renewing or some consulates when applying say that it is unsafe because the tenant may stop paying you, so you shouldn't use it as a main source of income. But of course, you will find people who apply successfully only with rental income, but generally, you are taking a risk with that. Now, let's talk also about work under the NLV and specifically about remote work for non-Spanish companies. Now, the non-lucrative visa is an old visa, okay, and an old residency that was created when there was not much remote work, okay? So explicitly in the law, the NLV prohibits working in Spain, okay? And it is not clear about working remotely for non-Spanish companies. It is actually a gray area, right? Remote work for foreign employers, once you already have your non-lucrative residency, once you have it, I'm not talking about the initial application, it is a gray area because there is a Supreme Court ruling stating that someone who is working remotely for a non-Spanish company could actually retain the non-lucrative residency. And the Supreme Court said it, right? I have many videos about this, also with Ainhoa Manero from Stern Abogados, expert immigration lawyer. And I also know many people who were and are and probably will continue working remotely under the non-lucrative residency. Now, let me be clear with this. If this doesn't apply at the consulates, when you're applying initially, consulates apply a strict, and everywhere in the world, apply a strict no work criteria at the initial application, okay? If they have the slightest doubt that you are working at the time your visa starts or in the future, they will deny you. There are very specific cases, and I have articles on Spainguru that I released last week, for example, people working at specific types of work, like working on an oil platform in the North Sea, okay, who got the non-lucrative visa in Edinburgh, and they officially stated, okay, and they just renewed it, okay, so this person goes every 15 days or every month back and forth to the North Sea to work. And I know Manero also told me that she had customers or clients who are pilots, for example. So due to the nature of the work, consulates accommodate that and they can still get the non-lucrative residency. So as you can see, it is not a really black and white thing here, okay? If you're in this situation, always go with an expert, okay? So you can find on Spainguru.es, of course, but of course, this is not a straightforward case. So I would always not go do it yourself if you're in this situation. And also, if you plan to work under the very last moment, be very careful. If you're applying and you're still working and you're promising to quit even before the visa start date, you have to be very careful. It is a very case-by-case scenario, very consulate-by-consulate scenario. So be very careful, right? So applicants have had visas denied if the consulate suspected work activity post-approval. If you plan to work remotely, consider the digital nomad visa instead. Of course, now, later on, many years after, there's the digital nomad visa that accommodates better the situation of working remotely for non-Spanish visas. Now, of course, I'm not an immigration lawyer, I let the experts talk. And here I have Ainhoa Manero, who is invited for the non-lucrative visa Q&A session. So no presentation, just question and answer from you guys. Ask her anything, expert immigration lawyer with many years of expertise, on March 10th at 5 p.m. CET. So join, it's free. You get the opportunity to ask anything and you get the recording. And also ask me anything about moving to Spain on March 24th. Not only about the non-lucrative visa, but any other visa or anything related to moving to Spain. So definitely join those two sessions, okay? And if you can't, for any reason, you can watch this video, which is the top 20 most asked questions of 2025, answer for 2026 by Ainhoa Manero. I highly recommend you watching this 25-minute video because it's really enlightening about many questions that I have compiled from literally thousands of comments in 2025 from you and told Ainhoa, now you got to answer those. All right, let's continue with health insurance requirements. Very important, health insurance must be private, okay? And it cannot be travel insurance. And I say this because BLS, which is a private company, sometimes it has pop-ups there saying like, buy my travel health insurance. But then they also say a travel health insurance won't be accepted for the application, right? So be careful with that. Now they're also offering long-term health insurance that is compliant for the NLV, but between us, I was checking and I think they have a 70% tag price up the real price if you ask directly to exclusive agents, brokers, etc. Okay, that you can find on Spainguru.es. 100%. They have a huge overprice. So consider that. Shop around and compare. Now, full coverage in Spain, this is the conditions that the health insurance need to fulfill in order to be compliant for this visa and any other visa. Full coverage in Spain, no coverage or deductibles, no copays or deductibles, huge, very important. No reimbursements with asterisks because not all the consulates apply this. Houston, for example, mentions it. Other consulates outside of the US are very verbal about this. For example, in Venezuela, in Chile, I've seen it. And depending on the officer reviewing your case, the reimbursements will say, no, this is a denial. So be careful with those. Pre-existing conditions must be covered. And this is a big one because, of course, most people move to Spain with some pre-existing condition. It's almost important to, for example, be 60 years old and just like be like a Formula One, like just 0 kilometer, as we say in Spain. It's impossible. But there is an article, an asterisk here. There is a nuance, very, very important, that depending on how serious the pre-existing conditions are, the health insurance providers may still sell you a compliant health insurance policy that excludes those pre-existing conditions. For example, if they are not serious, for example, high blood pressure, yes, they will say, we exclude this, but still we can provide the certificate of coverage that is needed for the non-lucrative visa application. Now, there are serious pre-existing conditions. For example, if you were diagnosed with cancer in the previous 5 years and you're under remission, unfortunately, if it's less than 5 years, it's going to be extremely hard, if not impossible, to find someone to cover you with a compliant health insurance policy. To give you an example, right? So now, how people navigate this situation? Many people move to Spain somehow, and after 1 year, they will apply for the Convenio Especial, which is you pay your access into the public healthcare system in Spain, which has the great advantage that the treatment for all pre-existing conditions is included, okay? You still have to pay retail price for your medicines, but still the treatment for the pre-existing conditions is included, right? And then potentially you can choose just to stay with the public healthcare system access for the third renewal, because usually the second renewal, because usually the first renewal, normally there is not enough time and you don't get effective access to the public healthcare system, so don't count on it, and you will still need to renew your private health insurance. But yes, and as I mentioned before, if you're a UK retiree, you may use the S1 form. Okay, you start the process in the UK. That will grant you later, once you move to Spain, you go to Seguridad Social here in Spain, and you finish it, and you get public healthcare system in Spain, and you don't have to use a private health insurance for the application. So great saving there if you're a UK retiree. Possibility, you can also use the private health insurance. Top health insurance providers in Spain, these are just a few. There are, like, I will tell you, like, big ones. There are more than 10. You have the biggest one, Adeslas, by far. Adeslas is the second and the third together is Adeslas. Then you have Sanitas, DKV, and Asisa, okay? And of course, on Spainguru.es, you probably heard it. I recommend an exclusive agent. I think he's the top in Spain, and he's also an immigration lawyer, Carlos Blanco, who is exclusive agent for Adeslas. So I highly recommend you contacted him. You get a non-binding quote, an initial consultation. This is all free of charge. Shop around, compare, but you will see that his option is among the best ones that you can find. Also because he's an expert immigration lawyer who knows the non-lucrative visa process perfectly. So he understands exactly what you need and the timings that you are managing, especially now that there's been quite a few, delays and longer time frames. So that's very important to have someone who understands to navigate them. Now let's talk about the medical certificate. It cannot be older than 3 months at the time of application. So 3-month validity. It has to have an exact wording. So use a template provided by the consulate. And depending which doctor you use, you have different ways to present it. If you're in the US and you use a US licensed doctor, just print it out with the doctor's letterhead, with the stamp and the number of registration of the doctor, signed by the doctor in English, hopefully in Spanish too, because if you also present it in Spanish, you don't need to translate it, and that's fine. In the UK, we mentioned that the doctor needs to be FCDO registered and the signature also apostille and sworn translated if not in Spanish. And there is a third option, which is the Spanish doctor. I can put you in contact with one if you go on Spainguru.es, and that can provide a certificate in Spanish. So you don't need to sworn translate it. You don't need to apostille because it's a Spanish doctor. And it's also fully online. So you say those two steps. But there's been in the past certain consulates that apply a very strict interpretation saying that you need to be physically in Spain at the time of issuing that certificate. So this doctor is issuing dozens of certificates per month, and you just fill the form. There is no strings attached in this, and you ask, I'm going to be applying from this consulate, and the doctor tells you, oh yes, I have this certificate is being accepted in the consulate, etc. Just to be clear, this is absolutely nowhere in the law or in the rules that you have to be physically in Spain when the certificate is issued. By some certain consulates, they apply this interpretation. Okay, so that's the situation with the medical certificate. Now let's talk about the criminal background check. So depending where you're from or where you lived in the past years, you need to provide a certain police background check. In the USA, is the FBI background check. In the UK, is the ACRO. Okay, so you have different timings to request it, different procedures to do it, but generally and common to both is that you have to get an apostille once you have the certificate. In the USA, is the federal apostille. In the UK, is the apostille, and it needs to be sworn translated into Spanish, right? And unless stated otherwise, it has a 3-month validity, and it needs to be valid when you apply with it at the consulate or BLS office during your appointment. And this process, the process to obtain the certificate, the process to obtain the apostille, the process to sworn translate it, and many people ask, should I also sworn translate the apostille? The answer is yes. If you want to be in the safe side, this week somebody asked this question, and many people, more than 5, saying like, yes, do it. I was required that in San Francisco. I saw it last month that someone had to rush for a sworn translation of the apostille itself. So yes, do it. In my opinion, yes, you spend a little bit more money, but less friction. Now let's talk about proof that you are not working. This is a big one, very flexible depending where you're applying from. There's one story or another. You have both stories like denials, rejections, or success. So it is very hard to put or condense everything in 1 or 2 slides. It is very specific on each consulate and even the people that work in the consulates, right? So generally, if you want to be on the safe side, apply without working. Okay, if you need to work, continue working until the very last moment. And many people, I understand it very well. It is crazy that they ask you to quit your job before getting your visa granted, especially in the US, which many people have their health insurance tied to their employment, and then maybe they don't get their visa granted or whatever. It is, and also there is the processing time that you're not working anymore, and maybe you don't get your health insurance coverage. So it's very hard decision. But the truth is that consulates, they apply this crazy criteria, and this is something worldwide generally, that they prefer people who are not working, and some consulates are very strict about it, right? So in order to prove this, if you're a pensionist, it is pretty clear that you are not working, okay? But if you were and you resigned, also an affidavit or sworn declaration of non-employment. You also need to, in many cases, promise or show that you don't intend to work in Spain. Some consulates also want the wording that you even remotely in Spain, so sign that. I have templates on Spainguru.es that people use every day, of course, changing to their specific situation. If you're a retired person, retirement letter of pension proof strengthens the case or makes it actually very straightforward. And if you're self-employed, for the US, notarized affidavit promising not to work. If you're in the UK, self-employed or contractor, a letter from HMRC, an accountant stating having ceased trading and the register for self-employment. And in the UK, normally would be for an employed person that resigned, a P45 form, okay? And generally for the UK, that form will be very difficult to avoid. Okay. As you can see here, there is a very clear, a very simple table, depending on the consulate, of specific cases that were reported on Spainguru's community. For example, in DC, people were still employed at the time of application, but they promised to stop working with a date in the future, but before the date they wanted to start their visa, and they got approved. In Miami, some people were asked to resign before, showing a resignation letter. In Houston, we had two cases, okay, during this year, during the last 12 months. In July, there was one that someone who promised to stop working before the visa start date and could not even apply, right? And you can watch the recordings of previous presentations about this. In Los Angeles, apparently they tend to be more flexible, where you can submit an intent to resign before approval. And in London, and generally London, Manchester, and Edinburgh, maybe they let you, apply, okay, but then before granting the visa, they want your P45, yes, and they give you only 10 days to supply it, right? So that tends to be the case, although some people have successfully submitted a letter from HR departments stating that they were thinking about resigning or promising to resign, etc. But it is a bit of a potluck, as some people refer to. So always confirm with your lawyer, with the consulate, with the BLS, and also first-hand experiences from people applying at those specific consulates. Okay. Another one that is interesting is many people say that Spanish consulates are not allowed to Google you, but they do. Okay. And this was proven in December 2023. National from Venezuela applying for the non-lucrative visa at the Buenos Aires consulate was denied, and the consulate said because this person showed activity in their LinkedIn profile. So this person appealed the decision, went to Madrid court, and the Madrid court said that the consulate was right. Okay, so after this ruling, consulates may Google you and see whether you are truly, or if they have any doubts, okay, truly working or with plans of working, etc. So be careful with that. Update LinkedIn or your online presence in order to reflect your non-working status. As you can see, the consulates apply a very strict, very hard line on this situation. Once you get the non-lucrative visa, a gray area starts, right? So this is also something that I wanted to bring to your attention. As we mentioned, if you bring spouses or dependents, you need to get your marriage certificates. They need to be new copies with a new validity of, unless stated otherwise, 3 months. Okay, they need to be apostilles, from translated if not in Spanish. Excuse me. The same happens for birth certificates if you're moving with children. If you're not moving with children, you don't need birth certificates. All need to be apostille and strong translated, right? And remember that after May 2025, adult children, so more than 18 years old, and ascendants can no longer be dependents. They must apply as main applicants unless they are, let's say, physically depending on you. There are certain conditions, okay? It's not 100% excluded, but it's going to be very, very hard as of May 2025 when the new regulation changed. We mentioned a lot about sworn translations and the apostilles, and the important thing about sworn translators. These are not normal or common translators that you can hire online or anywhere. Sworn translators from Spain, traductores jurados, are appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They're given a unique registration number, a unique stamp, okay, and they have to pass a very difficult exam to become one. They only deal with one language pair, all right, but on Spainguru, if you need to translate from any language pair, okay, so from any language to Spanish and sworn translation, you can find my recommendations on spainguru.es. That's very important. And very important is not that you don't need to send overseas your physical documents, okay? You either scan it as a PDF, you attach it to the email, or you're in a platform of one of my recommended partners and you upload those documents, you select the options, I want sworn translator, I want the urgent service or not urgent service, etc. And then they will charge you or they will quote you depending on urgency, depending on complexity, depending on quantity of pages. Normally, the prices are between 35 to 45 euros, depending on complexity, for the usual documents for the non-lucrative visa application. And then they will send them back to you via email. Excuse me. Via email, right? And those attachments, those are the ones who you will print out and add to the filing for the submission, right? Now, the apostille process, Spain is part of the Hague Convention. The Hague Convention says that these countries, there are more than 150 countries, when they use official documents for processes with other countries from the same convention, they need to legalize the documents in order to be valid for those processes, right? So if you use an FBI background check from the USA, Spain doesn't recognize that unless it is apostilled, right? So that is the legalization process. Now, if you are in a country that is not part of the Hague Convention, for example, United Arab Emirates, yes, then you will have to legalize it at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of that country, yes? So, for example, Canada recently joined the Hague Conventions. Not all the countries are part of the Hague Convention, so always check whether those documents need to be legalized in a country that is part of the Hague Conventions or not, okay? And always, when you are calculating your timings, allow time to obtain the apostille, and also the sworn translation of the apostille itself will take some more time. Now, let's have a Q&A break. Remember, I'm recording this. I'm going to upload this to YouTube and then send you the recording. And we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, okay, as well. And of course, if you're enjoying the webinar, please remember that you can always leave a review on Trustpilot. There's the button there that will redirect you to Trustpilot. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And now let's go with a few questions. This is a new way that I'm doing, not so that you don't have to wait until the end for asking your questions and receiving an answer. So let's go through that. So if you can show 3 years of the minimum amount needed, you don't need recurrent income. If you can provide more context for the question, because I don't know the interpretations, but you don't need to have recurrent income. You can have just savings, right? So if you're applying one person, 29,000 euros savings for the initial application. But for the renewal, potentially they will ask you to show 60,000 euros because it's for a 2-year period. You don't need recurring income. You just need savings, okay? And that's gross amount of savings, right? So I don't know exactly what the 3 years means. Asking from Boston, can there be a problem if there is a mortgage or on a rental property or any other mortgages? So they ask for any credit reports. So that depends on the consulates, and I can't really remember. I remember that LA for many, many years didn't like mortgages. Then many people were approved even having mortgages as long as you have the financial threshold. And in fact, the law doesn't say anything about mortgages as a reason to deny you, okay? But this could be a strict consideration from that consulate. I tell you that I don't remember whether Boston or not is strict about this. Ask the community, ask a lawyer, and read the first-hand experiences and read the requirements of Boston. I'm afraid I don't know by heart whether there was a case. Right now, in the back of my head, I don't remember anyone who got denied because of a mortgage, but also some lawyers, they also are very cautious about these big debts. As I said, it's nowhere in the law, but they will, in a way, if you prepare this application with time, maybe they will make you restructure where your mortgage payments are coming from this account or not, or will frame somehow the information so that it doesn't show straight away that you have it, okay? So yeah, that's the situation with mortgage. If you have a liquid assets, do they offset the income requirement? If you have liquid assets, well, depending on what type of assets, technically, maybe not, like generally, the consideration is if it's liquid without penalties, if it's readily available, you can have a certificate that is apostilled or notarized and is official from the bank, from the funds, from the bonds, for example, and so on, that is liquid and you can access it readily. This should count towards your financial threshold. But I'm not an immigration lawyer. Always study this on a case-by-case. Can we get a medical certificate from a Spanish doctor in Spain, obviously? Yes, of course. You can go on Spainguru. Yes, I put you in contact with one. Just fill the form, and the doctor will contact you, and everything is done online. Is there any benefit of being married at the time of applying, or can my partner and I just apply individually? Both things you can do. The benefit is that the financial threshold is lower for a couple, it's 36,000, whereas if you're applying individually, it's going to be 28.8 times 2. And then when you renew, that may be double. So that's the main benefit of applying as a couple. American couple married in Italy in 1998. We will need to track down the certificate in Florence. Yes, you need to get the original certificate and apostille by Italian authorities, and it will have a validity as well. Can you please explain the needs or benefits for having VPN when living in Spain? VPN. This is the connection online. I don't know. I don't know exactly about that. All right. There's many questions. I will have to leave some, I think, for the end. So to continue with the presentation, what is the time period consulates look at for the criminal background check? Mine shows a minor infraction 33 years ago. Is that okay? Generally, yes. If it's a minor infraction, like smoking pot outside of university 30 years ago, driving under the influence many years ago, if it's not something serious, usually can be overlooked. Okay, generally. Okay, but this is studied on a case by case. If you get an officer that is and also like what it means serious, right? It is a blood crime, conviction crime, time sentence in jail, stuff like that. I understand from your statement that is not the case, but if you are somewhere around there, always seek for legal advice, because there are ways to apply with, let's say, more serious charges, right? That should have been deleted as per the Spanish penal code. Okay, and that could be a way to do it. Now let's continue with the presentation. Sorry, guys, but many questions there. But we need to continue with the presentation, and I will address all the questions later on. I'm sorry for that. Let's continue. Application process. Let's talk about timing, process, and common pitfalls. Now let's talk about the overview. Right, you start at least 3 months before the intended application date, 3-4 months ahead application date, not when you want to move to Spain, because now there's a 1 year visa validity period to move to Spain, and you can move anytime during that 1 year visa validity period. You book a consulate or BLS appointment, and this is a huge bottleneck in many of the consulates in the UK and in the US, because they don't have any appointments, and then suddenly they open the calendar and everyone jumps. You need to be online that specific day to get your appointment in the next 2 to 3 months, 4 months even. Okay, yesterday, for example, the calendar was open for certain consulates, and you could see how people were crazy about it. So it's very important. And sometimes people say that you should start trying to get the appointment even at the moment when you start gathering your documents, or even before. Now, generally, you will have to submit your application in person. Not all the consulates work in person, but in the UK and the US, they do. And wait for the decision. It can take 1 to 3 months. But now some consulates are taking even longer, especially after the Ley de Memoria Democrática, which is the law that permitted descendants from Spaniards until the grandparents. This law ended in October 2025, but still there's a backlog there, and things are getting, there's a big workload in some consulates, especially consulates where there's a lot of, let's say, Latinos or Spanish descendants. Like, for example, Miami, today, a member wrote to me asking me, like, okay, I've been waiting for 5 months. Is this normal? We've seen Manchester 14 weeks, 18 weeks, 20 weeks. We see this every week, people posting that. So really, it can be anything, to be honest. So that's why it's good to be part of the community, for asking about the timeframes, also so that you're not alone, you're not getting crazy for no reason. There are many other people in your situation. And it's very important to stay in updated about that, right? So once you are approved, that you will be, hopefully, and you will pick up the visa in person, or some consulates, they have the service that they send you the passport back with the visa stick in it. Most common mistakes for the application: insufficient financial proof or wrong format. That can happen. Insurance doesn't meet Spain's requirements. For example, it has co-payments. Expired documents, medical certificate expires in 3 months, background checks, missing the apostille or sworn translation of the apostille, that can happen, or still shows active income. We went through the nuances of that. Now let's talk also about the timing of your application. when to start what, right? So this is from moment zero. You decided you want to move to Spain. This is the year to do it. What do you do during the first or second month? The first month, you start with the longest paperwork. That usually is the police checks, okay, FBI, ACRO, etc. But sometimes if you got married in other countries like Trinidad and Tobago, I heard, South Africa, Cyprus, those, or someone that just asked there, Florence, right, Italy, maybe it is makes sense to start also getting that new marriage certificate, because it will take longer than generally if you are applying from the country where you also got married. So that's what you would do. You would sworn translate and you would get the apostille. Month 2 or 3, you get the financial documents, sworn translation for everything. Month 3, you get the medical certificate. That normally is one of the last things to get because it expires also fast and doesn't take too long to obtain. You get your health insurance as well. Okay, minimum allow 20 days before the appointment date and hiring the insurance itself. You book the appointment, right? On the month 3, you book it. You start searching for the appointment way before, but hopefully on the month 3, you get an appointment in the future. Then in the month 4 or 5, you attend the appointment. All the documents need to be valid when you submit, and that would be a perfect timing. Another way to see it, step 1, of course, you research and plan. And if you want to know more about the research and planning stage of moving to Spain, you can join my free webinar, Moving to Spain, that I have every month. And it is, again, free recording. You can ask anything. And also you can join my co-hosted webinar with Ainhoa Manero, where you can also ask about immigration questions to an expert for free. So first, research and plan. Then step 2, you gather documents. 3, you get the appointment. You submit the application. Step 4, you wait for the decision. As you can see, this can be anything from 2 weeks to 5 months in the worst cases, very worst cases. And then you travel to Spain during the visa validity time. So the total process approximately between 3 to 9 months from start to arrival. We're coming back to taxes and specifically about capital gains tax planning. You can see that this is one of the common questions or concerns for people moving to Spain, that they're, for example, owners of a house and they are planning to sell it before moving. And there are ways to mitigate the capital gains tax in Spain. Like if you're older than 65, if you are selling your main home for the last 3 years and you use all the proceeds into buying a new home in Spain and you can prove all this, there's ways to mitigate it or even not pay that tax. But the best way altogether is to just not become a Spanish tax resident during the same tax year in which you sell your home, right? So if you sell during a different tax year before, for example, you sell in 2026 and you move to Spain during 2027, in 2026, you were not a Spanish tax resident. Therefore, there's no doubt that you wouldn't have to pay capital gains tax on a house sale in 2026, right? Remember that when you become a Spanish tax resident, you will have to pay taxes on your worldwide income. And that includes capital gains tax of a home that you sell. And another thing that people don't quite see is that you become a Spanish tax resident for the full year once you become a Spanish tax resident. That means if you move to Spain after, June 1st, and you spend in Spain 183 days physically in Spain during that year, then your Spanish tax residency goes back to January 1st. So if you sold in January and you move in June and spend 183 days during that same tax year, you are liable for paying capital gains tax on that home sale, right? And this is something that you probably want to avoid because usually in the US, UK, CGT rates may be lower than Spanish rates or even non-existent, right? So it's always important that you consult with a tax advisor who can run a simulation of your taxes and also consider the timings when you apply, when you sell your home, when you move to Spain, just to make sure that it also makes sense from a tax perspective. So it's very, very important. And I also have recommendations for cross-border financial planners in case you have pensions, you have investment trusts, etc. Those are also things that you need to consider on how you structure them before moving to Spain and plan accordingly, because there could be unwanted surprises, to be honest. Now let's talk about consulate appointment tips. These are tips, general tips that I see from people attending the different consulates. Arrive early, bring originals and copies of everything. Yes, people say that it's incredible the waste of copies that it had to do, but in order to prepare, you need to do it, unfortunately, because people were requested to have copies of different things, even randomly, and changing every single time. That's why reading the first-hand experiences is very interesting, very important, but it's always better to have more than cry later on. Organize documents in the order listed on the form and the order that people that applied before said that you need to order it. The officers reviewing your case will love you if you do it that way. Some consulates don't accept credit card payments. Maybe they just take cash, okay? And some consulates don't accept family appointments. There's a big differences in Miami, Mexico City, Los Angeles. If you're applying with a family, sometimes the family appointment works. Sometimes you have to get one appointment per each family member, even in different days, and then you go all at once during the same day from the first appointment that you get. So yes, again, reading first-hand experiences is key here, and staying updated. Key takeaways: start early with the whole process. Begin at least 4 months before your target date for the appointment. Check with the consulate and BLS the official requirements. They vary a lot when you read them in English, when you read them in Spanish, when you read them on BLS, and they're updating those requirements, their websites, right? So you hear the people, you read the people saying like, last month this requirement wasn't on the page, now I have it, right? So you need to stay updated on that, and if you see any variation, of course, post it in the group or read it from people who are gently posting those changes. So staying updated is very important. And plan financially, plan from an immigration perspective. Those two verticals are very important, that you have them sorted out. This visa, you can do it yourself, okay? But consult experts so that you understand that your decisions make sense, not only for the application of the visa itself, but also from a strategic perspective for the mid and long-term plans in Spain. Okay, so if you're planning to stay long-term and get your long-term residency, then you have to observe certain requirements. And if you plan to stay for the Spanish passport, if you have dual citizenship or not, also you have to have all those considerations. So not only think about the visa application, but also think from a long-term perspective. Look over the trees. Now let's talk about after the approvals, your first step in Spain. Some general recommendations, some are requirements. First one, you need to enter Spain within the visa validity period. Now it's 365 days, used to be 90 days, now it's 1 year. So great, you can enter anytime during those 365 days, okay? But if you enter before that as a tourist, be careful, because it could have bad implications. Also think that if you enter from outside of Schengen, you will have proof of entry into Spain, directly into Spain. But if you enter Schengen to another country, Germany, France, Italy, and then you go to Spain, maybe you don't have immigration control. So there's no proof of your entry in Spain. For that, you have to go to the best. It's not that you have to go, but the best you can do to avoid headaches is get a declaración de entrada, which is a one-page document that you bring it to a national police station at the border or at the train station or at the airport, and you make it stamped by the police saying like, I enter Spain during this date. And then when you go to get your residency card, you show this paper. This paper is issued by the police by themselves, so it's a proof of entry into Spain. Second, register at the local padrón or town hall. You will need a proof of address. Not always necessary, but 95% of cases will be. So once you move to Spain, you either rent a property, you either buy a property, you either go to someone's house, friend, family, etc. And if you're renting, the best way to obtain a proof of address once you are in that city is to register the rental contract. That has to be generally at least 6 months long at the city hall. They will give you a certificate saying you are empadronado. Estás empadronado. You have a certificate that proves that you're living in that city, and that will be required when you get your tarjeta de identidad extranjero or TIE card. Then officially you have 30 days from your entry date in Spain, 30 days officially, to get your TIE card or residency card. That is the plastic card with your face that says that you're under a non-working visa or residency, with a start date, with an expiration date, right? This is the physical proof of your residency in Spain. This is the TIE card, not to be confused with the NIE. The NIE is not a card, it's a number, it's a número de identificación de extranjero. And that number, when you apply for the non-lucrative visa, comes on the visa itself, that it goes into your passport. And that number won't change as long as you're a foreigner living in Spain. If you become Spaniard, that number changes into a DNI. Right? But that number is just the number. And the TIE card is the plastic card that contains the NIE number. Okay? Then, normally you have 30 days to get your TIE card, but no one can because there are no appointments again. So you have to go through the appointments bottleneck for the second time now to obtain your residency card. At the police station, some people take 3 months, 4 months, you name it, depending where you move. If there are more foreigners living in that area, it takes longer. And that's why they extended the initial validity period of the visa from 90 days to 365 days. So you have a valid document to stay in Spain without problems, with multi-entry and exit from the country, so that until you get your residency card, at least you have that. A recommendation: open a Spanish non-resident bank account to pay your bills, your rentals, your utilities, etc. Get a Spanish SIM card, because they will send you SMS from the procedures, and it will be required to have a Spanish phone number, but maintain also working your original SIM card, okay, or port your number, etc. So you also have access and control over your bank accounts in your origin country, etc. when you receive 2FA messages, etc. Right? And this is a bonus one: get a digital certificate or clave. This is once you get your residency card, there is something called digital certificate, which is a software that you install in your computer, and you obtain it by showing your TIE card at the relevant authority, and then that software signs in your name officially when you do procedures like visa renewals. Okay, and the clave is not a software installed. It is something that you send a request, they send you a PIN code, and you can use that PIN code to identify yourself to do a specific official procedure, but it doesn't work for every procedure, but for most of them, okay? And it is better and easier, the clave, because it works well in the mobile phone, in your computer, wherever you are, and usually it's enough. So yes, have it in mind. Let's talk about the TIE card and the padrón. We said the TIE card is the plastic card that represents your residency card. You will need paperwork. You will need to bring the documentation for the non-lucrative visa. So that's why also printing everything when you apply and then bringing it to Spain. This is many people who recommend doing so, because when you get your TIE card, they will also ask you for stuff from that initial application, like the document that says that they also gave you an NLV in some cases. And we mentioned also about the empadronamiento before. Now let's talk about renewal process. Yes, we said that once you enter Spain, there is an initial residency duration of 1 year. Yes, you enter Spain, you have your passport, you have a visa in it with a NIE number. That's what you got. Technically, you have 30 days to get an appointment to get your residency card. Yes, that will not happen until the second month, for example. So when you go to the police station, you get your paperwork. They say, okay, we're going to make a residency card for you. That takes 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you get it. On the third month, you get your residency card. You see that the start date should match the day in which you entered Spain. So that was 3 months before. So you're already 3 months into your residency, right? So the start date of your residency should match that entry date in Spain, plus 365 days is the expiration date. So it's exactly 1 year after you enter Spain during the visa validity period. So your first renewal for the first period of 2 years, years 2 and 3, should start 60 days before your expiration date on your TIE card. And you should apply immediately 60 days before, because if any problems arises, if you have any difficulties, whatever, or a denial for your renewal for any reason, you still will have time, because you can still apply for a renewal up to 90 days after expiration date. So it's important to apply as soon as possible because then you get your renewal, you stop thinking about it. But if you have any trouble, you still have time left for reapplying, etc. Okay, you will have to prove again finances now for a 2-year period. You will have to show that you didn't have health insurance gaps, that you are empadronado, and other requirements. Okay, and as I said, after the first residency year, you get 2 years renewal. Then there is a second renewal for 2 more years, total 5 years. And then after 5 years of uninterrupted residency in Spain, without health insurance gaps, and with a maximum time of 10 months in 5 years outside of Spain, maximum. That's the maximum you can be outside. And you would be eligible for the application of the long-term residency, which is much better than the non-lucrative residency. Okay, so think about that, as I mentioned before, when you plan your strategy for the long term. Minimum study requirements for the non-lucrative visa and any other temporary visa. The Reglamento de Extranjería that got renewed and took effect, the last one on May 2025, says that you have to stay in Spain in the immigration calendar year, not tax year, 183 days in order to renew your visa. But I put there an exclamation mark because there is a Supreme Court ruling that says that that requirement shouldn't be there, should be deleted, and it should be included in the main organic law, not in the Reglamento de Extranjería. Therefore, if you get a denial because you didn't spend 183 days during an immigration year, you will win the case 100% of the time if you bring it to court. Okay, you can watch several videos about this, or the video with Ainhoa Manero answering the top 20 questions that I published and I mentioned before, that you can also watch on Spainguru's YouTube channel. Still, I have put this, I think, simple minimum stay requirements or maximum absences for the eligibility of the different types of residencies. For the non-lucrative residency, which is a temporary residency, technically, gray area, Supreme Court doesn't like it. You have to stay a minimum of 183 days in a calendar year, not tax year, if you want to renew it. For the long-term residency, if you want to apply for it, more conditions, but a maximum absence of 10 months in the previous 5 years before application, and you should not be outside of Spain in more than 6 months in one row. For citizenship, when you apply for citizenship, for people who can apply after 2 years of legal residency, maximum 90 days per each year of the 2 years before the application of citizenship. That's also another important threshold that is nowhere in any law. It is in jurisprudence, in judge resolutions. Also, people ask about the transition to work permit. Some people say, well, I want to start working again. Don't mention that in your intent letter at the consulates, because as we mentioned, they are very paranoid about this. But you can also apply for a work permit from scratch from a consulate, but it's going to be very hard. It is much easier, not easy, but easier. It's not automatic, but it's not impossible. After 1 year of residency, potentially you could ask for a modification of your residency, non-lucrative residency permit into a work permit to work as a contractor for your own project. Okay, this is cuenta propia. You present a business plan, it's approved or not, and you get your work permit. Or if you get sponsored by a company who sends you a job offer and sponsors you, cuenta ajena, okay, working as an employee. Now, the wise way to do it is you renew your non-lucrative residency, and once you have the renewal for 2 years, then you apply for the modification for a work permit, because in case the modification of work permit is not accepted, at least you have the renewal of your non-lucrative residency, right? So the process for the modification usually takes 1 to 3 months. And the benefit is that now with this new work permit, of course, you will have the right to work in Spain and be resident in Spain. And also that counts towards the residency status or requirements for the long-term residency and also the citizenship, right? Generally, for the citizenship, most countries is 10 years of legal residency in Spain. Okay, unless you marry a Spaniard and you live in Spain for 1 year, it gets reduced to 1. Or if you are Ibero-American, Filipino, Guinea Equatorial, Andorra, or Brazil, it's only 2 years of legal residency. You will have to pass the CCSC culture exam and DELE A2 if your country is not a Spanish official language, for example, Philippines. Okay, and with the countries that have access to the 2-year fast track, then Spain will allow to keep the second citizenship. This is a big question. If I'm American, do I have to renounce my American citizenship? So in practice, you don't. No one does. America or USA doesn't care about what Spain requires of our renouncing. There is an expensive process and lengthy process to renounce your American citizenship. It takes $3,000. You need to go to the consulate, have interviews, etc. And this is nothing that you need to prove you have to do in order to get your Spanish citizenship. So in practice, you keep both passports. Both countries don't need to know. When you travel to the US, you enter with the US passport. When you travel back to Spain, you enter with a Spanish passport. And that's how people navigate this. How can Spainguru help? You can find better partners, more than 50. You have better immigration lawyers. You have tax advisors. You have gestores or accountants, financial planners for filings in the US, in Spain, health insurance, compliant health insurance policies for Spanish visas, sworn translators in any language pair, apostille services in the UK and the US, property rentals, personal shoppers, pet transportation, ship transportation for your car, anything, international moving quotes, anything you may think of for your move to Spain. Spainguru, I have personally vetted over the years my partners, and you are in very good hands. You can see the reviews online, and you can just use any of them. And of course, shop around, compare, and but I can promise you that I did my homework, and I'm just putting on your radar the best ones out there and with the best conditions. You can always send me an email to Spainguru, hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails. And now we can continue with the Q&A session. If you have to leave earlier, please leave a review on Trustpilot. It really, really motivates me. It helps others find this content online on YouTube. If you're watching this on the video on YouTube, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and write your questions in the comments below. Now let's go with the Q&A session. If you have sufficient savings and rental income, you still need to show and document the rental income and have a manager in place. So if you have sufficient savings you're over the financial threshold, you don't need to show anything else, right? You don't need to show everything you got. So savings, there's nothing more liquid than savings, right? So that's a way to see it. Now you can complement things with rental income, right? But I understand from your question that there is a slight concern that they think that the rental income that you have may be considered an active income. So that really is on the hands, is in the discretion of the person reviewing your case. As I mentioned, if you have one property or two long-term and you just get the rental paid every month, there's no operations involved, right? So there's not much. So it should be considered passive income. But if you have 30 properties on Airbnb, you have to do check-in, cleanings, management of the portals online, etc. That's a business, right? If you're somewhere in the middle, nowhere it's established where in the middle exactly, it could be or not considered to be a business. In that case, if you have that concern, well, create the firewall, create the framing, how you show this information, yes, so that it is not considered to be active income, right? And as I said, normally, if you have, let's say, $1 million in the bank, to say, and you have 60 properties there being rented, just showing the $1 million in the bank should be enough. You don't need to also show the rental income, okay? That's my particular opinion. I'm not an immigration lawyer. Always consult with immigration experts. This is not legal advice. And take it always with a pinch of salt. Ask the community as well, because these things tend to be very, very depending on the criteria of each consulate and person reviewing your case. I understand that the non-lucrative visa allows you to arrive in Spain within 1 year. It used to be 3 months. So once you arrive in Spain, the 1-year validity period of the visa begins as of the actual arrival date. No, it starts the date that is written on the visa. So if your visa says it starts on July 1st, 2026, and you arrive in November 2026, your visa validity started on July 1st, 2026. It doesn't start on December. And technically, when you go get your TIE, the start date of your residency should be the date in which you enter Spain. If the application decision can take 3 months, all those apostille documents that were required to be within 3 months will be expired. Yeah, they will be expired, but they need to be valid at the time of application. Is the 183-day minimum stay requirement consecutive days? No, they don't have to be consecutive. Or can it be 183 days within 1 calendar year? Yes, so within 1 calendar year, they don't have to be consecutive. It doesn't matter if as a tourist or holding a residency or holding a visa, doesn't matter. Your physical presence counts. If the toe of your foot touches Spanish territory, that counts as 1 day in Spain. Doesn't matter why. Okay? But remember that the calendar year starts on January 1st and ends on December 31st. So whatever you did before January 1st is a different tax year, right? So if you sell your home before December 31st or on December 31st and you move to Spain on January 1st, different tax years. Clock got back to zero. Therefore, you are not a Spanish tax resident, let's say. Join my tax webinar. It's free, and I talk a lot about this. If my spouse is LATAM and I can obtain citizenship in 2 years, can I also obtain citizenship in 2 years, or am I still on the 10-year timeline? So, where are you from? If you're LATAM too, I understand that you're not LATAM, but just to make the more context that you give in the question, this is pretty obvious. You will say it's true, but for other people asking questions, it's always great to give more context. So if she's LATAM, so she's Ibero-American passport holder, she will be eligible to apply for a Spanish citizenship after 2 years of uninterrupted legal residency in Spain without health insurance gaps, no more than 90 days per each year before applying, etc. Let's say that she applies finally. That can take anything from 4 months. Only once I saw that. Mine took a year and a half, 2 years took my citizenship. I'm originally from Argentina. And then you have to wait for the processing. So it could be 2 years. And then she gets the Spanish passport. She becomes Spanish. And after that, first of all, you need to have your marriage registered in Spain, and you need to previously to count. And then 1 year of residency in Spain with your now Spanish wife in order to become eligible to apply for Spanish citizenship, which also takes time to process. So that's the timeline. Remember, I'm not an immigration lawyer. I know the best ones for Spanish citizenship. This is very important. It sounds easy, but I can tell you there's so many little but very costly mistakes that can push you, and have strong, very big delays. So at least consult 1 hour or 2 or 1 hour every 6 months with experts. You can find it on Spainguru, just to make sure that you are on the right track and that you're taking the right decisions so that you don't lose time, okay? Some people apply for the citizenship thinking that they already had the 2 years residency, and they apply the day before they get the 2 years residency. They didn't do the calculation well. They don't know what certificate to obtain, blah, blah, blah. And then they get denied after 2 years. After 2 years of waiting, they said, no, you were not 2 years in Spain. Why? Because 1 day, right? So those mistakes happen all the time. So please, please, please consult with people who know what they're doing. Very important. So if I enter Spain 5 months after NLV visa, if provided, the TA will only be valid for 7 months. So let me see. I'm bad for maths. Exactly. So the TA will be, if you enter Spain 5 months after. No, well, no. As I said, you enter Spain, let's say July 1st. And then it takes you 3 months to get your DA, or 4 months. So July is 7 plus 4 is 11, no? So the 1st of November, you have your plastic card. You look at it and you see the residency start date is July 1st, right? So you should consider that your residency starts the day in which you enter Spain within the visa validity, right? So it is true that your TIE, let's say, the TIA will only be valid for 7 months. Yes, you will only have, since 4 months passed, is 12 minus 4 is 8, only 8 months. And 6 months after, then you should be able to already apply for the renewal, right? So yeah. So the TIA is the plastic card. What is important is your residency, right? The residency dates. Regarding capital gains on the sale of your residency, what if you sell your home for an amount that is less than what you paid? That would technically be a loss. Then there's a loss. You didn't make any capital gains. But the best is not having to prove that. You still need to make paperwork. That's the thing. Questions? So those were the questions that I could publish because they had a question mark at the end. So if you ask something and you include a question mark, then it is easy for me to publish it. But I think we went through. Well, I see someone here. We have government. Always ask and add your question mark at the beginning or somewhere in the question, so I can easily publish it for everyone to read. So we have government pensions over the required 36,000 amount. Do we need to show bank account details? Normally, you need to show the bank statements anyways. Yes, as far as I understand. So from Montana, according to information from Consulate, investment accounts cannot be included as income. Yes, always check the information of the Consulate. So investment accounts, no. As far as I understand, investment accounts, no. But for example, bonds can be included, as far as I understand, in the UK. For example, certain kinds of bonds. Just got married in Gibraltar. My wife has 9 years left on her passport. Does she have to get a name change or the passport before the application? I don't know. Hard for me to answer that one. So now publishing, published. Oh, I still have questions to publish. Sorry. I'm confused about savings. Could you repeat what the role is in application? Well, savings is money you have in your bank, and they count towards the financial threshold if you want to use them to apply for the Spanish non lucrative visa, right? If you have 30,000 euros in your bank and you have those savings, you show the bank statements showing that you have those savings, and that's very, very valid. If I am Latin born and citizen and Canadian citizen as well, and apply for an NLV with Canadian passport, can I apply for the citizenship after 2 years? The answer is yes. Although the law says that you can't, for many, many years, they have been accepting this situation, right? It is best if you can get your residency with your Latin passport, but not all the consulates will let you do that, and generally not. But don't worry, it will be a little bit more difficult, but it is absolutely possible, and many people do. Okay, you apply with the American passport, Canadian passport, whatever, and non-eligible for the 2-year passport. You get your residency, and then you apply for the eligibility for the Spanish citizenship using your Latin passport. But in this case, again, consult with experts who understand the little nuances of this, because there's like double last names in the Latin passport. In the other passport, there's only one surname. Be careful with those things that can delay stuff, and it's important that you at least consult. Consult an hour, consult 2 hours. I'm not saying like you hire those lawyers for the whole process, okay, which can be, you have to pay for them. I did, and I think it's money well spent, but it's not for everyone. You don't have to, but at least consult 1 hour or 2 just to make sure, or at least if you're gonna submit the application, make it checked by a lawyer before you submit it. Okay. All right, I think we made it to the end. I really appreciate everyone joining today. I will send you the recordings of this webinar. I hope you liked the new presentation. If you were in previous webinars, you'll notice that this presentation is much shorter, roughly half the size, 45 slides versus 99 of the previous one. The previous one was very, very big, very long, and we made it for just 1.5 hours. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Please leave a review on Trustpilot. You don't have to write much. If you leave a review, just those stars there really help. Not only they make me happy, to be honest, they make me really happy and they make me really motivated, but also, believe it or not, helps other people who never heard of Spainguru to find this content, to find the groups, to join the community, and we all get more with the community grows, because there's more people there sharing their stories, sharing their opinions, sharing their information, and we get much more out of it. Okay, so yes, it definitely really, really helps. And of course, you can always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. You can see in the reviews there, you can read other people. I always answer my emails, always. Okay, so take time. Sometimes I take 1 day, sometimes I take 2 days when it's a very bad day, but sometimes I answer in the very minute. Okay, so don't hesitate to contact me for anything, and at least I will point you in the right direction. I will give you the resources, and I'll stay with you. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'll send you a recording very soon. Have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you in the next webinars and everywhere else. Bye bye, take care.